Hi there, my name's Andy, and today I'm going to talk to you about this. This is the new IELTS writing criteria that was introduced earlier this year. Now, if you're already familiar with the IELTS writing criteria, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, this doesn't look all that different from the previous version, right? And yes, you'd be right, because this new criteria doesn't actually change how the test is scored. So what's the big deal then? Well, let me explain. In the past, there were always two versions of the writing criteria band descriptors. The first were the public band descriptors. This version was available to everyone, students, teachers, everyone. However, what some people didn't know was that there was actually a top secret version of the criteria band descriptors. This version was more detailed than the public version and was only available to IELTS examiners. This is what they used to score your writing. Now, what's so important about this new version of the criteria is that it includes all the details from that top secret examiner-only criteria. That's right, they've combined the two versions of the band descriptors into one single document that describes everything you need to do to get a high score in IELTS writing. And it's now available to everyone. In this video, we're going to specifically examine the new details that were previously available only to examiners. In particular, there's one big change from the public version that test takers should now know. That big change is the inclusion of bolded text. The bolded text are parts of the criteria that are written in a bold font. You won't see them everywhere, but they serve an important purpose. You can see at the top of each page of the band descriptors, it says, bolded text indicates negative features that will limit a rating. That means if your writing includes a feature described in the bolded text, you can't get a higher score in that specific criterion, even if the rest of your writing is perfect. It is essential that you're familiar with the bolded text and know how to avoid making those mistakes if you're wanting to score well. What's also important in this new criteria is this sentence here. A script must fully fit the positive features of the descriptor at a particular level. This means that your writing needs to include the positive features described in the band descriptors. These details are especially important if you're aiming for the highest scores, like a band 8 or a band 9. If you're interested, I'd recommend downloading this. This is a PDF that includes a sample essay prompt with a band 9 sample answer. The sample answer is annotated with parts of the new criteria, so it'll show you exactly how and why the essay would get a top score. Download it for free by clicking the link in the description. Let's shift our focus back to the bolded text for now. Let's start at the lower bands. This first example of bolded text is the same for both Task 1 and Task 2. It says, where there is proof that a candidate's answer has been totally memorized. So if the examiner can tell that you've written something from memory, you'll receive a 0. And notice that this applies to all 4 criteria. So to avoid getting a 0, you need to respond to the question in front of you. Don't try to memorize long pieces of writing. Just make sure you answer the question you have on test day using your own ideas and words. The next few examples of bolded text are at band 1, and again they're the same for Task 1 and Task 2, and it's the same for all 4 criteria. It says, responses of 20 words or fewer are rated at band 1. That should be easy to avoid. Remember that Task 1 asks for at least 150 words and Task 2 asks for at least 250 words. As you prepare, allocate your time carefully. Don't spend too long on Task 1. You should aim for 20 minutes on task 1 and 40 minutes on task 2. Band 1 also has another bolded text for the task achievement criterion in task 1 and task response for task 2. It says, the content is wholly unrelated to the prompt. So, what you write about matters. If your response is wholly unrelated, it means it has nothing to do with the question prompt. For example, say you have to write a letter to a friend about a birthday party, and you write a letter to complain about a broken TV, well, then your answer has nothing to do with the prompt, and you'd receive a score of 1 for this criterion. In Band 2, the standard bolded text is in coherence and cohesion. Generally, to score well in coherence and cohesion, your writing needs to flow logically and needs to be well organised into a paragraph or paragraphs. It also needs to be on topic. The bolded text in Band 2 says, the entire response may be off topic. Let's look at an example to better understand what's meant here. This Writing Task 2 prompt says, the internet has made knowledge immediately available to people through computers and smartphones all around the world. Much of this knowledge is also free. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this trend. So this question is about technology making knowledge immediately and freely available. If you answer the question by discussing future trends in transportation technology, you're not answering this question. Even though there might be some connection between the ideas, the topics are not the same. Your entire response would probably be off topic, and you could only achieve a Band 2 here. So make sure you read the question carefully to avoid going off topic. The next band with bolded text is Band 3. It's only in grammatical range and accuracy for both tasks. It says, length may be insufficient to provide evidence of control of sentence forms. So again, this limit is about how long your response is. If your answer is too short, the examiner is not going to be able to see that you can use a mixture of simple, compound and complex sentences appropriately and correctly. As you start to aim for higher band scores like a Band 7, 8 or 9 in the grammatical range and accuracy criterion, you'll need to focus more on using a wide range of grammatical structures, whilst limiting punctuation and grammatical errors. The final bolded text that is the same for both Task 1 and Task 2 is in Band 4. First, there's one in Task Achievement or Task Response. It says, the format may be inappropriate. Format relates to the way you have organised and presented your response. For Task 1, you must write your response in letter format for general training, or as a paragraph or paragraphs for the academic test. For Task 2, you'll write an essay, so you need to format it using paragraphs. You also need to write your responses in sentence form. Note form, bullet points, or a numbered point format, like you can see here, is not appropriate. And if you use this format, your response will be limited to Band 4. The next bolded text in Band 4 is in Lexical Resource. Overall, for this criterion, you need to use a variety of precise and appropriate language in order to achieve a higher score. You might use appropriate idiomatic phrases, and your writing needs to have few or no spelling mistakes or word formation errors. The bolded text here refers to using words that are unrelated to the task. So even if you use a lot of high-level vocabulary in your writing, if it's not related to the task, you won't be able to score higher than 4. Here's an example. This is part of a response to an essay about using the internet as a source of knowledge. You can see that the writer has used a lot of really good language related to the topic, Words and phrases like tools, Wikipedia, paper-based encyclopedias, online knowledge, and broad all relate to this task's topic and will help the candidate get a good lexical resource score. However, if these sentences were in an essay about children playing sport, the words and phrases used would not relate to the task, and the lexical resource score would be limited at this Band 4. The last bolded text for Band 4 is in the grammatical range and accuracy criterion. It says, subordinate clauses are rare and simple sentences predominate. Okay, what does this mean? Well, this is about the kinds of sentences you use in your response. Remember, this criterion is partly about grammatical range. So you need to use a mix of different kinds of sentences and not just simple ones. So the first two sentences here are examples of simple sentences. There is one idea in each sentence. Pat is a teacher. She teaches science. However, a sentence that contains a subordinate clause is considered a complex sentence. This kind of sentence is usually longer because it has more than one idea. Look at the second two sentences. They're examples of sentences with subordinate clauses. The first one uses who to add more information about the subject, Pat. Pat is someone who teaches science. The second sentence uses because to add information about the reason why Pat teaches science. Because she enjoys helping students to discover new ways of looking at the world. So pay attention to using a variety of sentence types and make sure you use complex sentences. If you only rarely use subordinate clauses, you won't be able to score higher than a Band 4, even if all of your sentences are correct. Okay, let's now look at the bolded text, which only applies to writing Task 2. Remember that in Task 2, you're writing an essay. The two areas of bolded text that are only for Task 2 are for Band 5. The first is in the task response criterion. It says, the main parts of the prompt are incompletely addressed. What's important here is that you answer all of the question prompt. To do this, you'll need to read and analyse the question carefully. Look again at this task question. It says, the internet has made knowledge immediately available to people through computers and smartphones all around the world. Much of this knowledge is also free. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this trend. So for this prompt, you need to discuss both the advantages and the disadvantages. So if your answer only discussed the advantages, the prompt is not completely addressed. Your score here would be limited to Band 5. The other bolded text for Band 5 in Task 2 is in the Coherence and Cohesion criterion. It says, paragraphing may be inadequate or missing. In Task 2, you need to make sure you use paragraphs adequately and appropriately. Look at the example here. Notice that it's written in one section only. Even though all the information is appropriate for the task, all parts of the question are covered well, and the writer connects ideas within sentences, there is no paragraphing. Everything is presented in one chunk, without being divided into separate paragraphs. This is not appropriate for an essay, which has separate sections like an introduction, main body, and conclusion, with different ideas being presented in the body. For Task 2, you're advised to spend about 40 minutes and to write at least 250 words. So, given these constraints, aim for a minimum of 4 to 5 good, well-structured paragraphs to avoid being limited to Band 5 for coherence and cohesion. Here's our example again. It's now been organised into 4 paragraphs. There's an introduction, a conclusion, and 2 body paragraphs in between. This is an example of adequate paragraphing. So now we've seen all the bolded text for task 2. Now, as you aim for a higher score in this task, it's less about avoiding mistakes and more about including high-level language and ideas. If you click the link in the description, you can download a free PDF which includes a sample Writing Task 2 prompt and a Band 9 sample answer, which is annotated with relevant parts of the criteria, so you'll be able to see how a high-scoring essay comes together. This will help you if you're aiming for a high score. Let's now look at the bolded text which only applies to Writing Task 1. If you're taking the IELTS Academic, there is one example of bolded text for Task 1 which applies to you. It's for Band 5. It says, there may be no data to support the description. So to avoid this limit, you have to include data from the graph or diagram and use it in a way that supports what you're describing. For example, if you're describing a table that shows exports of wheat over a period of time, rather than say, over the 5-year period, wheat exports grew, you should say something like, over the 5-year period, wheat exports grew from 134,000 tonnes to 257,000 tonnes. Now, if you're taking the IELTS General, there are 2 examples of bolded text for Task 1. They're both for Band 4. The first says, not all bullet points are presented. Here's an example of a General Training Task 1 question prompt. Notice there are 3 bullet points. You must cover all of them in the letter. If all 3 bullet points are not covered in your letter, you cannot score higher than a 4 for task achievement. The second bolded text says, the tone may be inappropriate. Tone relates to the way you say or write something. Your tone could be formal or informal, for example. The way you write and the words you use will change depending on the situation. So you need to think about who you are writing to on test day. If you're writing to a close friend, for example, your tone will be informal. You would begin with a greeting like, Dear Jack. You could use some casual and idiomatic language, and you might use contractions, such as it's rather than it is. You could write how's things to ask your friend how they are, and you might finish the letter with something like hope to see you soon and best wishes, Sam. But if you're writing to a company to ask for some information, for example, your tone would be more formal. You would need to use a greeting like Dear Sir or Madam or Dear Ms. Clark. It would not be appropriate to ask someone how they are in this kind of situation. Also, you shouldn't use contractions. And you'd finish the letter with something like kind regards. These choices affect the tone of your writing. Okay, so we've now looked at all of the bolded text in the new band descriptors. Let's recap the main points. Remember that the bolded text limits the band score you can get for one or more of the 4 criteria. If your response matches what is in the bolded text, you cannot score higher. Also remember that most of the bolded text is in the lower band scores, so you need to pay attention to these bolded text limits. If you don't, your test scores could be seriously affected. Finally, don't forget that while some of the bolded text limits apply to both tasks 1 and 2, and both the general training and academic tests, some bolded text is specific to either a specific task or a specific test. It's important to keep in mind that knowing about this bolded text will only help you avoid a low score on test day. But if you're aiming for a higher score, you'll need to be familiar with the positive features listed in the higher bands. A resource that will help you is the free PDF that you can get by clicking the link in the description. It will give you a good idea of how to apply information written in the higher bands to your essay. And as always, subscribe to this channel for more IELTS writing videos Or better yet, sign up to e2testprep.com. We have live classes, tutorials, and video lessons all about getting a top band score in the writing test. Thanks for watching and good luck.